Well, welcome to the Toys for Turtles and Other Animal Enrichment class. We're really excited to have you here. My name is Kayla Clark, and I coordinate the public programs for UGA Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant. So as an organization, we do research, extension, and education, really with the goal of contributing to healthy coastal ecosystems and communities. And part of the ways that we do that is through our educational center and aquarium. So I'm excited for you to get to meet Marine Education Fellow Maggie, who will be telling you about some of the animal enrichment projects that she has done during her year here with us. And you'll also hear from aquarium curator Lisa as well about some of the enrichment specific to our sea turtle. And I'm going to turn it over to Maggie to get us started on what enrichment is and what we'll be talking about today.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Kayla. Like Kayla said, I am a Marine Education Fellow, and so part of my job responsibility is to teach education classes, and also I do some of the animal husbandry, and part of that animal husbandry is a little side project I took on with doing some animal enrichment. So before we get started, I first want to ask all of you what you think enrichment is. So when I say the word enrichment, what comes to mind? So if you can type your answers into that chat box that Kayla talked about, that should be at the bottom of your screen. All right, and we'll give people a few more seconds to type in any answers that they might have. All right, Kayla, do we have some answers?
Yeah, so we have food and growing are the two words that are currently there, and we may have some more that are added, but I think we'll be excited to find out more from you.
Oh, perfect. So those are actually two really good answers, that enrichment does a lot of times involve food, and it also helps the animal with its growing as it ages. So enrichment is actually a great way for people to bring out an animal's natural instincts while they're under human care. And that's super important because as animal caretakers, we want to ensure that the animals are happy and healthy and that they're able to mimic those natural behaviors, even though they may not have the capability to be out in nature. So there are actually 5 different types of enrichment that you can give an animal. And so the first one is social. And that can be as simple as any kind of interaction with another species or another human being. It could be something as maybe itself. You put a mirror in with that animal and they're like, wait, who's this other animal? It looks just like me. The second one is cognitive. And that's kind of like giving the animal a brain teaser or making them think a little bit. Something that's really common is to give them a puzzle feeder. So you have food inside of something and the animal has to manipulate it or figure out, okay, how am I supposed to get this tasty treat out of here? And the third one is the physical habitat. So something that's super easy to do with animal enrichment is to just add natural elements to their habitat. So you could add something for them to climb on. You could add nesting. You could add some hides for them to hide and to take shelter from. The fourth one is food, which somebody mentioned already, which is a very popular one, because okay, sorry, there was a little bit of a glitch. And the fifth one is the sensory aspect of it. So using any of the 5 senses, such as taste or touching a new object, maybe you're adding something visual for them to look at, like a foreign object or some lights. Maybe there's new sounds, such as playing music for the animals, or even feeling anything. So any of the 5 senses is also a great way to bring out some animal enrichment. So when we are thinking about animal enrichment, we do want to make sure that we are keeping the animal's safety as our number one priority, because we don't want to give them anything that they might accidentally swallow or something that they might have that could injure them. So today I am going to do some live enrichment examples with you, and we are going to explore 2 different terrestrial animals today. And the first one that I would like to introduce to you is one that is actually the state reptile of Georgia. So this coastal reptile is actually very near and dear to my heart. But before we get started, I am going to ask you what type of animal this is, because it's important to know what animal you're dealing with first so that you know what enrichment will be the most beneficial for them. All right. So I have an animal here, and I want to know what animal you think this is. Like I said, I may have given some of you a hint by saying that it was the state reptile of Georgia. So
awesome.
If you think you know what... Oh, go ahead, Kayla.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up. It looks like we do still have some answers coming in, so we'll give it just a few more seconds.
All right.
So your options are box turtle, diamondback terrapin, or gopher tortoise.
So what animal is this? Maybe this is a little better view to help you decide.
Fantastic. I think we might still have a few answers coming in, but I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share the results so people can see what people thought that animal was. And it looks like most people, 86%, thought it was the gopher tortoise.
Absolutely. So if you said gopher tortoise, then you are correct. So good job. And those of you that said box turtle, you are very close, because box turtles are another type of terrestrial turtle that we have here at the UGA Aquarium. So a little bit of background information about gopher tortoises is that they are found in sandy longleaf pine ecosystems, and they are herbivores, so they like to eat the low-lying herbaceous growth. So this gopher tortoise would naturally graze on some grass, maybe some clovers, and she would eat any low-hanging leaves on the ground. And so that is why we have this enrichment device. And as you can see, it's very simple. It's just some PVC pipes, and there is some string hanging in between with clothespins that are hanging a variety of romaine lettuce and carrots for this gopher tortoise to eat. So typically we would give this gopher tortoise a nicely prepared salad. But naturally, this gopher tortoise is not going to find a salad in nature. So we're trying to mimic that natural foraging behavior and trying to give her a little bit of a challenge that's more natural for her. And she usually conquers it pretty well. As you can see, she really loves eating her lettuce. So what are some observations that you make about this enrichment and this gopher tortoise? So if you have any observations, kind of put on your scientific goggles and to look at this through a scientist's perspective. Type any observations that you notice, whether it's about the enrichment, maybe it's about the gopher tortoise itself. All right.
Okay. It looks like someone has noticed that it's slow.
Yes. So gopher tortoises are generally slow. A lot of turtles are. And gopher tortoises are no exception. But sometimes they can move quickly, but generally she's trying to eat a leisurely salad. So she's in no rush today.
And then also some other observations from our audience are that the tortoise is very persistent, that it has long claws.
Yes.
And then someone else hypothesized that maybe those long claws are to dig. So, some folks have also noticed that they're steadying itself with its front legs, and that there are two types of food.
Yes, those are all great observations. As you can see, she kind of gave up on her carrot and she's like, I just want to eat some more lettuce. But going back to the observations about her feet and how she's moving slowly. So gopher tortoises actually dig burrows in that sandy ecosystem. And if you notice, their legs, they don't have webbed feet like maybe an aquatic turtle would. But these legs are especially adapted for digging burrows that can be about 40 feet long and 10 feet deep. And these burrows actually play a really important role in the ecosystem because gopher tortoises are a keystone species. And that just means that without them, a lot of animals would struggle to survive because they depend on the gopher tortoise and the burrows. So those are all great observations, as you notice. And someone else pointed out that we do have 2 different types of food on here. We have the carrot and the lettuce. And sometimes there is some variety with it. These are just usually some of her favorite foods, which is why we gave them to her today.
We also have some observations. One is from Cooper, who says that it's really cute, and notice that it has a spiky lip.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you notice, she's really trying to reach for this lettuce. So gopher tortoises do not have any teeth like we do. And so if you notice, they have almost like a little beak on the front of their mouth as the pointy lipped, as we pointed out. And that's used to kind of shred the food that they're eating or to cut it up. And then afterwards, they use that really fat tongue that you may have observed. There she goes, to grab the food and to bring it into her mouth so that she can swallow it. So that's a great observation, Cooper. All right. Does anyone else have any other observations?
Yes, we've had some awesome observations. So thank you to everyone at home that is observing. We had a couple of observations specifically about the behavior. They're noticing that she is not eating the entire lettuce or carrot, and also that it looks like she's moving her head and neck more to eat instead of crawling.
Yes. So that is a natural behavior. Sometimes they may try a piece of food and then they may be like, that's not really what I'm looking for. Maybe it's not the tastiest, not the freshest. And so they will tend to move on. And that's something that they will naturally do, is to just go from plant to plant rather than to eat a whole piece of lettuce or a whole leaf and then to move on from there. So that is a great observation to make. A question that I have for all of you, you've been great with these observations, so keep up with the scientific mindset that you have. And what are some ways that we can improve this enrichment? Does anybody have any ideas for that one? How could I change it? You can help me out. How can I make this more enriching for this gopher tortoise? All right. Do we get some answers, Kayla?
Yeah, so we had some suggestions for doing the enrichment once a day, potentially having a different structure, or putting the turtle in sand so it has to move through that to get to the food.
Yeah, I love all of those suggestions. I think those are great, definitely to mimic that natural behavior. We would normally have her outside doing this, but because of the weather conditions, we weren't able to do that today. But naturally, we would put her outside in some grassy areas so she can graze, maybe some sandier areas. So that's a great way to do it, and to also to kind of add some variety, do it every day. So we generally will feed our terrestrial turtles twice a week, and that we would be able to add a little bit more. Maybe we could give her a little snack in between her typical feeding days. So that is great. All right. So it looks like this gopher tortoise is starting to finish up her salad. We're going to let her finish up eating her lettuce and her carrots. But I do want to share another coastal reptilian friend that's here at the UGA Aquarium. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my screen around, and we are going to go explore another animal. Now, this animal is very friendly, and there's no need to be concerned about it. It's actually one of my best friends. But we're going to go again, and I'm going to ask you the same question of what animal is this? So let me turn my screen around for you. All right, there we go. So if you have any guesses about this animal, what animal could this be?
And it looks like the responses are coming in. So again, if you see that poll appear on your screen, it'll have a green header at the top. And your options are corn snake, eastern king snake, and ball python. And if you can't figure out where to find the poll, you can also just type your response in the chat box as well. Although it looks like we are getting quite a number of responses. So we'll give it just maybe 10 more seconds in case anyone wants to add in if they think it's a corn snake, an eastern king snake, or a ball python.
Perfect. Maybe some different angles will help you decide.
So it looks like the most popular answer was corn snake, followed by eastern king snake, and then ball python.
All right. So very good. If you did answer corn snake, then you are correct. So this corn snake has been here at the UGA Aquarium for about 6 to 7 years. So it is a little bit of a juvenile because corn snakes, they can live to be up to around 20 years. It's a little hard to determine their exact lifespan. But if you notice, this snake is moving around a lot. And corn snakes are known to climb trees or other tall structures to collect their prey items. And sometimes, to bring out this natural behavior, we create an enrichment item. And so this is strictly made out of PVC pipes. I had a lot of fun kind of like building Legos to try to piece together a climbing structure for this corn snake. And so something that you may notice is you can see along the line, I have some rope that's wrapped around here. And so a question I have for you is, why do you think I added the rope onto this PVC pipe for the snake? All right, Kayla, did we get any guesses?
We did. So we have some hypotheses that it might be about friction, texture, a number of people thinking it's like traction, maybe to act as vines. So the snake can grip the pipes to help the snake move. And we've got a number of other observations. I'll let you respond to those, and then I'll also share the other ones that people have shared.
All right, perfect. So a lot of you are exactly right. You're on the right track, that it is for traction or friction. And because the snake could climb on the PVC by itself. It does have very strong muscles along the entire length of its body. But we also wanted to make sure that it wasn't too slippery and that the snake doesn't have to work too hard to try to hold on to this PVC pipe. So we did add some rope to give it a little bit more traction. But also the rope mimics more of the structure of tree bark. And so you know that trees are not as smooth as PVC. It's a little bit more rough. And so that was my reasoning for adding that. So those are some great hypotheses there. So does anyone have any observations about this snake as it's moving around? If you do, if you could go ahead and type them into the chat box. All right, Kayla, do we have any observations?
We have an observation that the animal is sticking its tongue out. I'm wondering if you could talk more about that.
Yes, absolutely. So snakes actually have an organ called the Jacobson organ that's located on the underside of the mouth. And this Jacobson organ allows them to literally taste and smell the air. And so as you can see, this corn snake is tasting and smelling its surroundings. Maybe it's investigating. This is a great sensory activity for the snakes because it's exposed to something that may not be in its home. And so what this snake is doing is just exploring around and trying to figure out, what's that smell? Or is there any food around that I could find? So that's a great question and observation. All right, do we have any others, Kayla?
We have a number of observations about the snake's movement. Some folks are noticing that it looks like it was moving upward instead of downward. That was a little bit earlier on. They also were noticing that it looks like it's turning around and coiling around the PVC pipe and sort of tangling in general in its movement.
Yeah. So like I said, this snakes will move around and climb the trees. And so that may be why it was moving upward, and maybe it smelled something that was higher up. And it does coil, it will coil around just maybe to get a tighter grip to make sure it's secure before it moves on to explore its next area. So these snakes will move around in various directions for various reasons. It's a little hard for us to kind of know exactly what the snake is thinking at the moment, but as scientists, it's kind of our job to kind of hypothesize. And maybe as we do more research, we're able to figure out what exactly these snakes are doing.
Thanks so much, Maggie. And we've had a number of questions about the coloration of the snake, both observations that people are asking and also some questions about why it has that coloration and that pattern.
Yes. So if you notice that it is a very brightly colored snake, and the name corn snake actually comes from its underbelly, which it's in the best position for you to see underneath. But you see this kind of checkered pattern. And corn snakes will get their name because this mimics Native American maize, which is a type of Native American corn. And so that's where scientists think the name corn snake came from. But also the coloration is very, very bright. And so they do like to hide in the foliage on the ground. So they like to hide under leaves and some like dead logs and stuff like that, because it is really good camouflage for them. It allows them to blend in with their environment really well. Great question and observation. Are there any more, Kayla?
There's several questions about what they eat, what their diet is.
Those are good questions. So young corn snakes will eat some smaller amphibians. So like they like to eat frogs, maybe some lizards. But as they get older, they will move towards rats or mice. They are also known to eat maybe some small birds or bats. Here at the UGA, it's trying to get away. Here at the UGA Aquarium, we will feed them a variety of mice as part of their diet. So that is a great question. All right. Were there any others, Kayla?
Yes. So one question was, as a follow-up to what they eat, how do they catch their prey?
So these corn snakes are actually constrictor snakes. So what they do is they will wrap around their prey and they'll constrict it. So they'll squeeze it, and then they are able to eat their prey. They usually eat it head first, and then they'll swallow it whole, and their stomach will be able to digest it. So those are really great questions and observations from all of you. So thank you. And I hope that you've enjoyed watching this little snake as it crawls around all over the structure and onto this table. So now what I want to do is I want to show you a wide variety of animals past the gopher tortoise and our corn snake. So we do have a lot of other aquatic and terrestrial animals that I've been doing enrichment with in the past. And so what we're going to do is have a brief PowerPoint, and I won't unfortunately be able to do them live for you, but we do have some videos and some photos of enrichment that I've done with other animals. All right. So this first one is a rearranged habitat with a snake. And this is actually the corn snake's home that we rearranged. And that's something that's really easy enrichment for people to do. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate where you're building something or you have to go out and buy something. It can honestly be as easy as rearranging the animal's home. And in nature, a snake is not going to stay in one place where everything is exactly the same. It's going to explore. It's going to move around and see all of the different sites that's in its environment. And rearranging a habitat is a great way to do this. It makes it feel more natural. If you look at the picture on the left, you can see everything's kind of spread out a little minimal. But then on the right, you can see that there's some leaves in there. There's a stick for it to climb on. You put a little plastic toy as extra enrichment. That's what the yellow tunnel is in the bottom left-hand corner of the right photo. So it can be honestly anything. Super simple, super easy. And even if you don't have a pet snake at home, you can do that with any animals, whether maybe you have a rabbit or a hamster And so that's an easy enrichment you can do at home. And the next enrichment kind of goes along with it. It is something as easy as adding a natural element from the outside world, such as leaves and Spanish moss. And so here we have a corn snake on the left and an eastern king snake on the right. And if you can type in the chat box some observations you notice about the enrichment preferences for each snake. So you can see that the corn snake is underneath a pile of leaves and the king snake is underneath a pile of Spanish moss. All right, Kayla, did we get any responses from people?
We did. So we had a hypothesis that it might provide coloring that's close to the snake's color, and that might be why they're choosing the leaf versus the moss.
Yes, absolutely. And so that was my hypothesis as well, that it has to do with their camouflage. And so naturally, you might find a king snake underneath a pile of Spanish moss, or you might kick up some leaves and find a little baby corn snake on the ground. So that's a great inference and hypothesis for that. And so I'm on the same page as you.
And it does seem like there are some other thoughts out there too.
Yeah.
In addition, it looks like people are curious if maybe texture or where you might find those items on the ground versus on the trees. And before we get too far, we did also have a question about your last slide. When you rearranged the snake habitat, was there a mirror in the rearranged enclosure?
So there was not. That was just the reflection from the lights overhead on the glass. So it did look like there is a mirror, and maybe at a distance the snake might see that reflection. So it was an unintentional added enrichment.
Awesome. Thanks, Maggie. And again, if folks have questions, feel free to ask them at any time and we'll be sure to answer them.
Yes. And yes, so there's some great observations about the placement of the leaves or moss naturally. Like we said, corn snakes, they do like to climb on trees. And so having a pile of leaves under trees makes sense. Some of that may be why the corn snake preferred the leaves over having the Spanish moss. And it could be the texture. Like I said, it's hard to tell what a snake is thinking, but I think that the king snake really loves the texture of the Spanish moss, because I will see her coil around it and kind of go in and out of the Spanish moss. And I think she just likes the way it feels, maybe how it's a little bit more rough than maybe just some soft soil or sediment. And it's just a different texture for her to play around with. So those are great questions and comments from all of you. I really appreciate all the feedback that I'm getting, because it's also helping me learn as a scientist and as an educator. So our next slide also features another reptilian friend. This one is more aquatic. It's an animal that can be found in brackish water, and it's a diamondback terrapin. And what I did is diamondback terrapins do live in like salt marshes or estuaries, and they will naturally hunt for fish, fiddler crabs, periwinkle snails, and Spartina. And as you can see, we're trying to bring out that foraging experience that this diamondback terrapin would naturally have. So we got some fake grass and we scattered some food around to see if she could find it, because terrapins have a great sense of sight and smell. And so this enrichment allows her to use both. She has to use her eyes to try to find it, and also kind of using her nose as well to smell for it. So it was a really fun way for her to engage in that natural behavior. So does anyone have any questions about the diamondback terrapin? No? All right, Kayla, were there any questions?
There were a few. They were curious, can they see colors, and does sense of smell work underwater?
Yeah, so those are two great questions. I am not sure about the color, if terrapins can see in color or not. So that is a question that I can find out, and I can get back to you with that answer. And they can smell underwater. They have a great sense of smell. That's one of their strongest scents that they have.
Awesome. And And there was also a question about why is it called a diamondback terrapin?
Yes. So the diamondback terrapin kind of comes from the pattern that's on the shell of the terrapin. So if you notice, it's like they're little diamonds on its back. And terrapins are a type of turtle that are adapted to live both on land and in water. And so what makes them unique is that they can live in brackish water, which is a mix of fresh and salt water. And so that's how they get their names and characterizations.
Awesome. Thank you for describing that. There are a number of questions about whether or not Pumpkin, the terrapin, has ever eaten the fake grass during this enrichment.
So she's never eaten it, like ingested it. Like you said, we want to make sure that it's safe. She has bitten it a couple times, just mistaking when I first put it in, she mistaked it for food, I think. But then she quickly learned that her fish and her shrimp were a lot more appetizing than that grass. So she has, since her first attempt at accidentally biting it, she hasn't really tried to eat it.
Well, I think those are all of our questions for now.
All right, perfect. So we are going to kind of transition into the more aquatic species that we have here at the UGA Aquarium. And so this next species is called a striped burrfish. And the burrfish, they love to come to the top of the tank. They're very social with people. And I added a mirror in with them to kind of bring out that socialization aspect of them, just to see what they would do. And actually, sometimes enrichment doesn't work the way that you hope or you plan. I thought the burrfish would maybe swim around, interact with their reflections. But when I did the enrichment, they looked at it. So I was lucky enough to get a picture of the burrfish looking at its reflection, but they generally weren't as interested in it. They were like, oh, that's cool, there's a mirror, and then they would swim away. And that's okay, because sometimes it's really good enrichment just to be exposed to enrichment, if that makes any sense, because it's giving the animals something new and something to kind of stimulate their brain a little bit, even if they choose not to. So our next animal that we have is called a triggerfish. And this fish is actually very entertaining to watch. If you have ever been to the UGA Aquarium, you may have seen it following you around. It is very social. They are very smart fish, and they can recognize people. And when I was thinking about enrichment for our triggerfish, I was doing some research and I found where you can make enrichment out of fire hose. So I was able to obtain some fire hose and to weave a fish out of it. So it's a triggerfish for the triggerfish. And I do have a video clip of the triggerfish interacting with it. But I first want you to make a prediction. And how do you think the triggerfish is going to react to this enrichment? And we do have a poll for you to answer. And so if you can just take your best guess, best hypothesis. And then we will, after we get all the results in, we will watch the video and see what happens.
And while the responses are coming in, we did have a question in the chat box about what a fire hose is. So Maggie, I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
Yes. So the fire hose is the fire hose that firemen use. A coworker was able to bring in some old fire hose. Her husband's a firefighter, and to bring it in, and then I cut out the strips of the fire hose, and then that's how I was able to make this enrichment.
Fantastic. And it looks like our responses have slowed down. So I'm going to, we've got a few more coming in. We'll give people just another second to add their thoughts, whether they think the triggerfish is going to ignore it, look at it, then swim away, bite it, or swim circles around it. And I am going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like people thought that it might be any of the four, but the most popular answer, with 48% of people responding, they thought that the triggerfish is going to swim circles around this fire hose fish. So we'll have to see.
Yep, we'll have to see. So Kayla, if you can go ahead and play that video, and we will see if you are correct. All right, so as you can see, Triggerfish is approaching it, and it's investigating. It's like, what is this object? See if we can get it. There you go. Oh, it took a little nibble of it. And let's see if it goes in for another. It's thinking, and it's like, not so sure about this item. So for those of you that said that it would bite it, you are correct in your prediction. It did bite it, and it did also, I didn't get a video of this, but sometimes when I put it in, it would swim around it, and it was very interested in this fire hose. Maybe it was the color, maybe it thought it was food, maybe it just thought, oh, it's another friend, I can socialize with it. And so those were all, thank you for participating in our poll, and those were some great predictions that we've had. All right. And we're going to move on to our last video for the day. And this was a wiffle ball that we used with our clear nose skate. And so skates are in the same family as sharks and rays. They are a type of cartilaginous fish, so they're just made out of cartilage. And the enrichment that I decided to give this one was more tactile and something that the clear nose skate would have to manipulate, because fish don't have hands to open or to move something around. So the next best thing is to give them something to roll around, right? And so here we have a clear nose skate with a wiffle ball that it could roll around and manipulate to get some food inside of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch this clip of the clear nose skate and to see if she's able to interact with it. So you can see that she's pushing it around a little bit. You see she's rolling it up the wall and right back down. So we do have pieces of fish, shrimp, and something we call gel food, which is just an in-house way to prepare some extra veggies and vitamins for these animals. And so as the clear nose skate moves the ball around, the food falls out of it, and then she's able to eat the food underneath. So do we have any questions about the wiffle ball enrichment here? Anyone? All right, Kayla, do we have any questions?
No questions, but I did want to say that our audience is really on point, because a lot of people had guesses before we showed the videos that there was food inside.
Yeah. So you guys are absolutely right. That's kind of a way to combine two different enrichment activities, one with food and one that's sensory. So like tactile, moving it around, foreign object. Because enrichment items, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can't have one that, oh, it's just food or it's just sensory. It can be a combination of a lot of things. So you guys are absolutely right. And I hope you've enjoyed watching some videos and photos of our enrichment with our animals. But we are going to do a live enrichment again with an animal that most people know and love, which is a loggerhead sea turtle with one of our animal curators, Lisa.
Fantastic. And so just as a reminder, as we transition from the PowerPoint, that you'll want to put Lisa into speaker view if you don't have her there already. And I know that we had a number of questions that came in after that Q&A about the wiffle ball. So at the end, we'll leave some space to circle back to any questions that might not have been answered during the program so far. And we will turn it over to Lisa now to find out about Neptune and some of the work that she does with the sea turtles. And again, you'll want to make sure that she is in speaker view. And Lisa, one moment, we'll get you unmuted.
We're good.
Thank you all for your patience as we navigate the technical.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla, and thanks, Maggie. That was really awesome. Even having seen those things before, it was a lot of fun. So what I want to do is I want to tell you a little bit about Neptune. She is in the tank behind me. You can't see her right now. She's sort of over in the corner. But like Maggie said, Neptune is our loggerhead sea turtle. And she is about 2 years old. She'll be 2 years old on August 8th. And I'll tell you a little bit about her and a little bit about the enrichment that we've done with her as well. So first, a little bit about Neptune. Like Maggie said, she's a loggerhead sea turtle. She's going to be 2 years old on August 8th. And she was hatched on Ossabaw Island. And we're pretty sure she's a she because the researcher that was working on the island actually put data loggers in the nests. And then that records the temperature throughout the entire incubation of the sea turtle. Once the sea turtle hatches, you can get that data from the data logger. And one thing that's interesting about the nest temperature of sea turtles and some of the reptiles is the nest temperature during a certain part of their incubation is actually what determines whether the eggs come out as male or female, which is pretty cool. So one way you can remember it for sea turtles, at least, is to say hot chicks, cool dudes. So warmer temperatures produce mostly females, like Neptune, and then cooler temperatures will produce mostly males. So we're pretty sure it's a she based on the temperature in her nest. And what we do here at the UGA Aquarium is we take in straggler sea turtles. So what a straggler means is that this turtle, like Neptune and the other turtles that we've had, have hatched out of their egg, but don't actually make it out of the nest with all the rest of the babies. So those turtles have basically a 0% chance at survival. The only reason they would survive is that they were found by any kind of sea turtle patrol or researchers or volunteers that are able to dig up the nest. They can actually be raised for a few years at permitted facilities around the state, like ourselves, and then we'll hope to release those animals after a few years. So one question I have for you is, what do you think that we need to do to make sure our animals are prepared for release? So you can type that in the chat box. Sorry, I'm gonna change my view here real quick. All right, so the question was, what do we think we do for our sea turtles before release? You can think about it, type some answers in. I'll come back to that in just a minute. But I did want to tell you why we have our sea turtles here. So our sea turtles are a really important ambassador for their species. So while they're here at the UGA Aquarium, we usually have them for about 3 years. So just depending on how long we have them means that they could see maybe 100,000 people that come through our aquarium during their couple years here. So they're a really important species. So they really help us to educate about beach ecology, marine debris, coastal reptiles, even just sea turtles themselves. They're a really great example. So it's really important that we have them here to help us educate the public. Now, did anybody have any ideas about what we do for our turtles?
Yes, there were a lot of ideas and really good ones. So a number of people thought that you might need to take the turtle to the vet. Some people thought that they needed to learn how to feed in the wild, or in general learn how to hunt and survive in the ocean or the sea, and be really healthy and strong before release.
Yeah.
And then the last one was to make sure their environment is as close as possible to their natural environment.
Definitely. So we try to make sure all of our animals, while they're here, their environment is as close as we can get to their natural environment. It is a little bit more difficult with some of the animals, but we do try and do that as best as we can. Now, with our sea turtles, like I said, before release, those were all great answers, and they are definitely things that we do need to take into account. So one, we need to make sure they're healthy, and they do get checked out by the vet. We use the Jekyll Sea Turtle Center, the Georgia Sea Turtle Center on Jekyll Island. We take our turtles to their vet, Dr. Norton, and he makes sure that they are healthy and ready for release. One thing that wasn't mentioned, I don't think, was the specific size. So they do need to be a specific size for release. And we also need to make sure they're eating live food, like you mentioned. And so we do start feeding them live food when they're young. So even when they're very small, we start feeding them like tiny little mud crabs. And as they get older, they can eat, slightly larger blue crabs or mussels or shrimp. Kayla, can you see me okay?
Yes,
Okay.
we can see you okay.
It froze on my end, so I want to make sure you could still see and hear me. So those were really great answers, and all things that we do take into consideration. So while they're here, enrichment is a really important part of their life. And food is also very important to them. They are big into food. So one of the things that Maggie mentioned that we can do for enrichment is different types of feeding. And one of the things that we do is make shrimpsicles, which sounds probably gross to us, but is very tempting for sea turtles. And so we make frozen ice cube trays with food inside, food items inside. As you might guess from the name shrimpsicles, they do have shrimp in them, but they also have maybe fish or gel food, those things that Maggie mentioned. And that allows the animal to chase the food around the top of the tank. You know, the ice cubes are gonna float. So, but like I said, as they get older, we can feed them live food. This is the skull from a loggerhead sea turtle. This would be a very large adult, but you can see they have sort of an extra fortification on the front, so that's their beak, and that can help to crush things like horseshoe crabs, full-size blue crabs. They can even eat whelks or conch or clam, mussels, things like that. So those are things that we can give to our animals for live enrichment. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about a really cool research project that we've been doing here for actually the past 6 years. So we worked with some faculty and students from Savannah State University and Georgia Southern University, and it's been a really great, different, groups of people over the past couple years. And we've actually looked at whether or not sea turtles have true color vision, or color preference, sorry. You mentioned earlier, someone had the question about color vision. And so there has been demonstrated color vision by sea turtles. I'm not sure if diamondback terrapins fall in that same category, but for sea turtles, at least, we do know that they have color vision. And we wanted to see if they had any preference in those colors. So what we did was we started with food preference, and we did this with our past sea turtles, Ryder and Lefty. And so we would actually present food with large tweezers. We would present 2 different types of food in the tank at one time and give them the option and see which one they preferred. And so any kind of favorite food we used as reinforcement in the later parts of the study. And so the second part was that color preference that I mentioned. So we actually used these wiffle balls, and there's 4 different colors. So we would present these wiffle balls in different color combinations, again with tweezers. So we'd present 2 different colors at one time. They would approach, pick a color, and they would get a reinforcement of their favorite food. Then we did have to make sure that color contrast didn't play any kind of role in this. So if you notice, the dark blue colored ball is going to stand out not very much compared to a yellow colored ball on a black background. So we actually used these colored backgrounds. And so we presented each of the wiffle balls against these colored backgrounds to make sure color contrast did not play any kind of role in this. And it turns out that they didn't. So we could move on to the next part. The next part was just presenting a certain device inside of the water and seeing what that animal did. So we did this with Lefty, and we also did it with Neptune. So Neptune has actually participated in all parts of the study, but our previous sea turtles, Ryder and Lefty, only participated in some of those parts as it's developed over the past couple years. So this is what our most recent device looks like. It's actually just 2 different dog toys that were purchased at PetSmart. But when you put them together and you can, excuse me, put food inside, it presents a really interesting device for our sea turtles. And we pack it with food, like you saw with the other wiffle ball and the skate. And I don't want to give away too much, but we pack it with food to keep her interested in this device. And Madeline, who's been working really hard behind the scenes for us today, she is going to put our other device, so we have 2 colors that we're using today. She's going to put the device in the water and see what happens. Now, we did choose our colors wisely. So when we looked at color preference, Ryder and Lefty, the first turtles that we did this with, they actually preferred yellow. Neptune has been a little bit of a wild card throughout this whole process, but she has preferred green a little bit more than yellow. But all of the sea turtles showed a low preference for the color blue. So we chose one device that is blue colored, which may not interest her very much, and we chose her other preferred color, which was green. So we put food in these devices, we hang them in the tank, and then we see what happens. So as you'll notice, I'm gonna try and stay out of the background here. You can see the device in the tank, and we will see what happens. If you have any ideas about, what she might do or different things that she has done, you can type them in. And it's a little bit different every time. Like I said, she's a little bit of a wild card. But the goal is for her to have a device that is, she can follow around the tank, she can push it around, she knocks it with her flippers, and you can see some of the food just fell out there. Hopefully, there she goes. Hopefully she'll go and she'll get those pieces of food. So it's a little bit like a reward, but it keeps it nice and interesting for her. And the goal of all of these enrichment devices and the programs that we do is to make sure that our animals' brains are staying engaged. So an animal that is, has these enrichment programs, enrichment devices, they really exhibit less stress because their boredom levels are low. And less stress really just means a happier and a healthier turtle. And a happier turtle means happier curators. So that makes us very happy as people that are working hard to take care of these animals. You can see Neptune is still pretty interested in this, but it's been a bit of a learning curve each time that we've done something different with her. If anyone has questions, we can just watch her for a minute, see how long she stays interested. But if anyone has questions about Neptune or what we've done with her, you can type them into the chat box, and Kayla can review those questions.
Awesome. Well, we do have a number of questions. I did want to add, in case anyone is getting ready to hop off of the call, that before you leave, we do want to hear from you, and we have an evaluation in the chat box. It only takes about a minute to complete. So you can click on that link. And there is also a schedule of our upcoming events and directions for the activity that pairs with this program. So that activity is an ethogram activity, which is a tool that scientists or aquarists or people working with animals use to document and study animal behavior. So you can try your own ethogram at home. And if you have a few minutes at the end, we'll let Maggie potentially explain that a little bit. But we do have a number of questions about Neptune for Lisa. One of those is, why does she not like blue?
That's a great question. So we're actually not sure exactly the reasons behind what, causes a high preference or a low preference. We have some hypothesis, which might involve different food items or, a blue color, maybe that, at least in a larger item, represents sort of a shadow to them, which could be predator related. But there's a lot of questions that are unanswered, but we've learned a lot along the way. So there she's just sort of interacting with it. She'll hit it with her flippers. Anything inside the tank is really interesting for her. But yeah, we're not 100% sure what the color preferences mean, but we do have some ideas, and we have ideas for future studies. So big shout out to our friends there at Georgia Southern who have worked with us most recently on those. Any other quick questions?
We did have a question about the fish in the tank and whether or not they serve as enrichment as well.
They do. So right now she's getting a bit large for this tank. So we're going to move her soon, which is why we don't have a lot of things in here. You can see sort of right here inside the tank, we have a fake coral, but anything that's inside the tank, including her tank mates, are important enrichment for her. So she does get interested and sort of follow them around sometimes. If there's a new animal in the tank, she might investigate that. So for that reason, we also do have to be careful what we put in the tank with her to make sure that all of our animals stay happy and healthy. Any last questions? And if you have other questions for Maggie, you can, toss it back. But at least for me, Neptune's still going, but thanks for joining me in the aquarium this afternoon. I really appreciate y'all being here. But I'm going to pass it back to, I'll just put it on mute. I'll pass it back to Kayla and Maggie for any last minute stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. And we hope that you join us again next week if you had fun. Next week, we are going to be learning about plankton, which are these microscopic algae floating around in the water that a lot of the animals that you see in our aquarium eat. So we'll have fun with that next week. And that is again at 11 o'clock on Tuesday. And then every Thursday, we do have programs for 4 to 8-year-olds with an accompanying adult from 2 to 2:30. And it is just about noon. So I don't think we'll walk you through the activity for the ethogram. But I will share my screen just so that you can see what that looks like. Well, I don't think we'll share the screen, but you can go onto our website, and I'll put that into the chat box right now. It's gacoast.uga.edu. And underneath our events tab, if you go to the one for today, you'll see where you can download that activity. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me as well via email. So we hope that you had a great time, and we hope to see you next week.